This weapon burned on water and couldn't be extinguished. This one could pierce any armor ever made. And this, it literally changed the course of human civilization. These aren't fantasy, they're real ancient weapons that absolutely terrified their enemies. Let's see what made them unstoppable. In 672 AD, Arab fleets surrounded Constantinople with over 1,000 ships. The Byzantine Empire was about to fall. Then they unleashed Greek fire, a liquid flame that burned on water, stuck to everything it touched, and couldn't be put out. Sailors jumped into the sea to escape the flames, only to watch in horror as the fire followed them into the water. The formula was so secret that only the Byzantine emperor and a few craftsmen knew it. They guarded it with their lives, literally. Anyone who tried to share it faced execution. To this day, we still don't know the exact recipe. Modern scientists think it was a mixture of petroleum, quicklime, sulfur, and naphtha, but recreations have never quite matched the original's terrifying power. Greek fire saved Constantinople for over 700 years. It was the medieval equivalent of nuclear weapons, a deterrent so powerful that enemies thought twice before attacking. The Byzantines used it to win dozens of naval battles, and its psychological impact was even greater than its physical devastation. Enemies called it artificial fire and believed it was sorcery. Now imagine a weapon so advanced that it took 150 years to make one properly. The Mongol Composite Bow wasn't just wood, it was a marvel of ancient engineering, made from horn, sinew, wood, and bamboo, all bound with animal glue. It took decades for the materials to cure and settle. The result? A bow that could shoot arrows over 500 yards and pierce any armor of its time. Mongol horse archers could fire accurately while riding at full gallop, a skill that took a lifetime to master. They could shoot forwards, backwards, and to either side. At the Battle of Liegnitz in 1241, European knights in full plate armor thought they were invincible. The Mongols stayed out of range, peppering them with arrows until the knights collapsed from exhaustion and blood loss without ever reaching their enemy. Here's something crazy. Composite bows were actually superior to early firearms. They had better range, better accuracy, faster rate of fire, and worked in rain. A skilled archer could loose 12 arrows per minute, while a musketeer struggled to fire 3 shots. The only reason guns eventually won: you could train a musketeer in weeks. A master archer took 20 years to create. The Roman Gladius doesn't look intimidating. It's only about 24 inches long. But this short sword conquered most of the known world. While their enemies swung long slashing swords that needed space, Roman legionaries used the gladius for quick, brutal stabbing thrusts. In tight formation packed shield to shield, the gladius was absolutely lethal. One thrust to the gut or throat, and the fight was over. Roman soldiers trained to aim for the abdomen and face areas that their enemies' shields left exposed. Ancient writers described Roman battle tactics as mechanical and methodical. Legionaries would stab, step forward, stab again, like a human wood chipper. The gladius was designed for the phalanx formation, where individual skill mattered less than collective discipline and brutal efficiency. Here's the genius part. Every gladius was virtually identical. Romans mass-produced them to exact specifications. This meant every soldier had the same reach, the same technique, the same training. They weren't warriors, they were interchangeable parts of a killing machine. While Celtic warriors showed up with custom swords and individual fighting styles, Romans showed up with a system, and the system won every time. Ancient Egypt's Khopesh looked like a question mark made of bronze. That curved blade wasn't just for show, it was a weapon that could hook your enemy's shield, yank it away, and then slash across their exposed neck in one fluid motion. Pharaohs were often depicted holding a Khopesh as a symbol of royal power, and unlike European swords, this design worked perfectly with bronze, which couldn't hold a fine edge but excelled at brutal chopping. The Khopesh dominated warfare from 3000 to 1300 BC. Its design solved a fundamental problem. Bronze is softer than iron, so straight swords would bend and dull quickly. The Khopesh's curved shape distributed force differently, making it more durable. Egyptian soldiers could use it to hook limbs, disarm opponents, and deliver devastating chopping blows that would shatter bones even through armor. The Khopesh wasn't just a weapon, it was sacred. Tutankhamun was buried with 2 of them. Temple reliefs show gods wielding Khopesh swords. When iron weapons eventually replaced bronze, Egyptians kept making ceremonial Khopesh swords because they represented divine authority and Egypt's military glory. The sword became more important as a symbol than as an actual weapon, the ultimate sign of its cultural impact. Picture a spear so long you needed 2 hands to hold it. Now make it 18 feet long. That's the Sarissa, the weapon that made Alexander the Great unstoppable. Macedonian soldiers held these massive pikes in formation, creating a forest of spear points that no cavalry or infantry could penetrate. The front 5 rows of sarissas would all be pointing at the enemy at once. Good luck charging into that. The Sarissa phalanx was revolutionary because it turned regular soldiers into an unstoppable force. Each soldier's sarissa extended beyond the man in front of him, so enemies faced 5 layers of spear points before they could even reach the first Macedonian shield. Persian and Indian armies, used to individual combat, couldn't break through. Alexander conquered from Greece to India, using this formation, winning battles against armies 5 times his size. But the sarissa had a fatal flaw. On rough terrain, or if the formation broke, these 18-foot spears became useless. At the Battle of Pide in 1608 BC, Romans deliberately fought on uneven ground. The phalanx fell apart, sarissas tangled together, and Romans with their short Gladius swords got inside the formation and massacred the Macedonians. The era of the super spear was over. Sometimes the perfect weapon has the perfect weakness. The Ottoman recurve bow was so powerful that a skilled archer could shoot an arrow nearly 900 yards over half a mile. There are verified records of Ottoman archers hitting targets at 800 meters. In 1798, the Ottoman Sultan's head archer shot an arrow 846 meters. They even held competitions with stone markers showing where champion archers' arrows landed. European muskets at the time had an effective range of about 100 yards. During sieges, Ottoman archers provided covering fire from ranges European defenders thought were impossible. They could shoot over castle walls from positions castle defenders couldn't even hit back from. The bows used Sickle, a type of horn and sinew composite construction similar to Mongol bows but refined over centuries. A master bowyer spent years creating a single bow, and the best examples were worth fortunes. For distance competitions, Ottomans used special flight arrows, incredibly light, perfectly balanced projectiles with tiny arrowheads, combined with their powerful recurve bows and a special shooting technique where they drew past their ear to their shoulder. They achieved distances that wouldn't be matched by firearms until the 19th century. The Ottoman bow culture was so refined that arrows were classified into 40 different types for different purposes. Before Roman legionaries drew their Gladius, they threw the Pilum, and it was brilliantly designed to be a one-time use weapon. The Pilum had a soft iron shank that would bend on impact, making it impossible for enemies to throw back. Even better, when it stuck in an enemy's shield, its weight would drag the shield down, forcing the warrior to drop it or fight with a useless bent javelin dangling from their defense. Roman soldiers carried 2 pila each. Before engaging in melee, they would unleash a devastating volley. The first throw from 30 meters would force enemies to raise their shields. The second throw, seconds later while shields were up and exposed, would punch through. By the time Roman legionaries closed for sword work, their enemies were shieldless, disorganized, and already wounded. The Pilum turned the opening moments of battle into a Roman advantage every single time. The psychological impact was massive. Imagine seeing a wave of heavy javelins flying at you, knowing that if one hits your shield, that shield becomes useless weight. Do you keep it and fight encumbered? Drop it and fight exposed? Either way, you've lost before the Romans even reach you. The Pilum wasn't just about casualties, it was about breaking the enemy's confidence and organization in the crucial seconds before close combat. The English longbow was over 6 feet tall and required 150 pounds of force to draw. That's like pulling a gym weight with 2 fingers. English archers trained from childhood, developing grotesquely overdeveloped shoulders and spines. Archaeologists can identify longbowmen's skeletons by their deformed bones. At Agincourt in 1415, 5,000 English archers obliterated 20,000 French knights, the heavily armored elite of Europe. Longbow arrows could punch through plate armor at 100 yards. French knights wore the best armor money could buy, and English arrows went through it like paper. Each archer could loose 10 to 12 arrows per minute. Do the math. 5,000 archers times 10 arrows per minute meant 50,000 arrows in the air every 60 seconds. The sky literally went dark. French chronicles described it as a storm of wood and steel raining from the heavens. The longbow changed society. Suddenly, peasant archers could kill noble knights from 200 yards away. The entire medieval social order, based on armored cavalry dominance, collapsed. Knights spent years training and fortunes on armor, but a farmer's son with a longbow could end them in seconds. England passed laws requiring every man to practice archery on Sundays. The longbow turned commoners into the most feared warriors in Europe. The crossbow was so deadly that in 1139, Pope Innocent II banned it, calling it too lethal for Christian warfare. The Church declared it hateful to God. Why? Because any peasant could pick up a crossbow, and with minimal training kill an armored knight. It took 15 years to train a knight, but 15 minutes to teach someone to aim a crossbow. The weapon democratized warfare, and the nobility was terrified. The crossbow's genius was mechanical advantage. A windlass or crank system let soldiers store energy in the bow gradually, then release it all at once. This meant crossbow bolts hit with tremendous force, harder than most arrows. They could penetrate any armor at close range. At the Battle of Crécy, Genoese crossbowmen faced English longbowmen. The crossbows had better penetration, but the longbows fired 5 times faster. The Genoese were massacred. Despite the papal ban, crossbows became the weapon of choice for assassinations and sieges. They were silent compared to early firearms, accurate and deadly. King Richard the Lionheart was killed by a crossbow bolt in 1199. The shooter was a common defender at a castle siege, the exact nightmare scenario the nobility feared. A peasant with a crossbow had killed one of the greatest warriors in Christendom. The weapon the Pope banned had killed a king. Ancient Greece's Kopis was a forward curved sword, the opposite of most blades. That forward curve concentrated force at the tip, making every blow hit like a hatchet. Greek hoplites used it to hack through enemy shields and armor. The weight distribution meant the blade naturally fell into devastating chopping strikes. Alexander the Great's cavalry carried a version called the machaira. It was the ancient equivalent of a machete, designed by weapons engineers. Mounted on horseback, the Kopis became even more devastating. The forward curve meant cavalry riders could lean down and deliver massive chopping blows while riding at speed. The blade wouldn't get stuck or lodge in enemies, because the curve naturally pulled it back out. Ancient historians described cavalry charges where riders would split shields and skulls in a single pass. The Kopis turned cavalry into mobile execution squads. The Kopis design spread across cultures. Falcatas in Iberia, Kukris in Nepal, and Kopides throughout the Mediterranean all shared that forward curve. Why? Because physics doesn't care about culture. A forward curved blade concentrates impact force better than a straight edge. It's simple engineering. Ancient smiths worldwide independently discovered that if you want a sword that chops like an axe and cuts like a blade, you curve it forward. Before all these specialized weapons, there was the spear. Humans have used spears for 400,000 years. It's the weapon that made us apex predators. With a spear, a human could kill animals 10 times their size from outside claw and tooth range. Every ancient civilization used spears as their primary weapon, because the math is simple. Reach equals survival. The side that can stab first usually wins. The spear is humanity's most successful weapon design because it's simple, cheap and effective. You can make one from a sharp rock and a stick. You can use it one-handed with a shield or two-handed for power. You can throw it or thrust it. You can fight from formation or alone. Ancient armies were 80% spearmen because spears work against cavalry, against infantry, against animals. The weapon that dominated warfare for 4,000 years was just a pointy stick done right. The spear's true genius showed in formation warfare. Shield walls from Vikings to Romans to Greeks all relied on spears. Soldiers would overlap shields and thrust spears through the gaps. The enemy faced a wall of wood and a forest of steel points. Breaking a shield wall meant walking into spear thrusts from multiple angles. This tactic dominated battlefields from 2000 BC until gunpowder, because no one found a better answer to organized men with shields and spears. The Romans took the crossbow concept and supersized it. The ballista was essentially a giant crossbow mounted on a cart, powered by twisted rope bundles for spring tension. It could shoot 3-foot bolts over 400 yards with enough force to skewer multiple soldiers in a line. At the siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD, Roman ballistae fired flaming projectiles and massive bolts that punched through defensive walls. It was artillery before gunpowder existed. Roman artillery crews were specialists who trained for years. They could hit specific targets at 300 yards, crushing gates, collapsing towers, or targeting enemy commanders. Sources describe ballista bolts going through siege shields, through the soldier behind it, and still having enough force to kill the person behind them. The Romans had mathematical tables for trajectory calculations. They turned mechanical engineering into military dominance centuries before anyone else. The Romans also built a smaller version called the Scorpio, a one-man portable ballista. These were deployed with legions as anti-personnel weapons, firing bolts that could punch through shields and armor from ranges infantry weapons couldn't touch. Imagine facing a Roman legion. First you get hit by Pilum volleys, then Scorpio bolts start arriving from 200 yards away, and then the infantry charges with Gladius swords. Romans didn't just have better soldiers, they had better systems. Every weapon on this list did more than kill. They terrorized. Greek fire made enemies believe the Byzantines had demonic powers. The Mongol bow made armies afraid to even approach. The Pilum made soldiers question whether their shields were protection or liability. Battlefield dominance wasn't just about who died. It was about breaking the enemy's will before swords ever crossed. That's what made these weapons legendary. Modern militaries still follow these ancient principles. Reach and range still win battles. Missiles instead of arrows. Psychological deterrence still prevents wars. Nukes instead of Greek fire. Standardization still creates effective armies. Mass production instead of Roman forges. These ancient weapons didn't just change their battles. They established military doctrines we still use 2,000 years later. The technology changed, but the strategy stayed the same. But here's the truth behind all these weapons. None of them worked without the right people. Greek fire needed brave sailors willing to get close to enemy ships. The longbow needed archers who trained their entire lives. Roman weapons needed discipline and organization. Technology doesn't win wars. Trained, motivated humans using that technology wins wars. These weapons were game changers because entire cultures built themselves around mastering them. These weapons shaped civilizations, decided wars, and changed history. They weren't just tools, they were force multipliers that gave whoever wielded them unstoppable advantages. If you found this fascinating, hit that subscribe button because we've got plenty more ancient military secrets to uncover. Which weapon surprised you the most? Drop a comment below. And remember, the most dangerous weapon in history isn't always the biggest or flashiest. It's the one nobody saw coming. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.